Good morning. So, how are you? I'm still in Chicago and answering your questions. Most of the questions are from readers of You Are the Universe, Discovering Your Cosmic Self and Why It Matters. I thank you for supporting the book, but you can also send me questions on any topic. And the place to send the questions, the email is info@jayo.com, info@jayo.com. Once again, you can send me questions to the following email address, info@jayo.com, info@jayo.com. Please also download the app Jayo, J-I-Y-O. You can do it on your computer or on your handheld device, and it's available both on Android and iTunes. Once again, the app is Jayo, J-I-Y-O, and you can also go to the internet and download jayo.com, J-I-Y-O. This is our ecosystem for well-being, where we all get together and post moments of wellness and inspiration, and we share with each other so we can move toward the critical mass of consciousness for a more peaceful, just, sustainable, and healthy and joyful world. So once again, the app is Jayo, J-I-Y-O. Now to today's question, which comes from Mehrdad Janbaksh. And he says, Dear Dr. Chopra, I've asked you this question before, but I guess there must be a long queue. But here's my question. If there is one consciousness or awareness, the core of all human beings, then what about justice? Who or what would be responsible for the good and bad things experienced by human beings in an eternal now? Okay, so let me do my best to answer your question. Consciousness is the ground of all existence, is one. And it differentiates into innumerable minds that experience innumerable bodies, innumerable sense perceptions. And that's how consciousness expresses itself, as knower, knowing, and known. So what we call the world is just sensory perception, the activity that is called sensory perception. What we call sensory perception in the body is an activity of the mind. What we call the mind is an activity of the self, the primordial self. The primordial self is modifying itself as knower, known, and knowing, seer, seeing, scenery, observer, observing, and observed. Subject, object, interaction between the two. The rest is a story. Even this is a story when I'm saying it. But without the story, all there is sensations, images, feelings, thoughts, and perceptions, which are all activities of pure consciousness, the ground of all existence, the self of the universe, which also happens to be yourself beyond your conditioned self. So in this understanding, it is very clear. Hi, Pam Butler from Fort Lauderdale. I hope you're well. So in this deeper understanding, then everything you have asked is coming from the point of view of a person, or the ego self that is squeezed into the volume of a body and the span of a lifetime. That itself is a process in the deeper self. That itself is a process in pure consciousness. So then what about good and evil? And what about social justice? Well, I'll come back to that in 15 seconds. Okay, so we're back. So once you sacrifice yourself for your self-image once you differentiate into that which you call a person, and then you identify with that which you call a person, then arise these constructs, good and evil and social justice. Nothing wrong with that. It's just basically the name of the game. You're a dream character in a dream world, having dream experiences, and then calling them good and evil, social justice, etc. Nothing absolutely wrong with that. Okay, it's just that before you wake up, these constructs are very useful, at least in the ecosystem that we live, called humanity, and ultimately all conscious agents, including animals. So, of course, a lot of people eat animals. Is there justice? Well, you decide from the point of view that you have. Ramanand Dixit, nice to see you here. It's always nice to see people who are there every day, and that gives me hope and gives me inspiration to keep posting as well. Sheila Sultana, thank you for being here. Okay, so now let's talk about good and evil. So, good and evil and justice. So, here's principle number one. Everyone in the world is doing their best. Everyone in the world is doing their best because they're acting from a certain level of consciousness. And I'm not saying this in a denigrating way, but as people trying to understand who they really are, they move through different stages of consciousness in their ego identity. So in the first stage of development, which we might call the fight-flight response, good and evil are as follows. Good is physical safety, and evil is anything that's a threat to physical safety. In the second stage, and let's call that the ego response, good is fulfilling your desires, especially ego desires, fame and fortune and all of that, and evil is anything that's a threat to that. In the third stage, centered awareness, good is peace of mind, and evil is anything that threatens that. In the fourth stage, the intuitive response, good is knowing answers, and evil is self-betrayal or threat to knowing. In the creative response, good is inspiration, and evil is a threat to inspiration. In the higher consciousness or archetypal response, good is that which expresses itself as truth, goodness, harmony, beauty, love, compassion, and joy, and equanimity, and evil is the opposite of that. Okay, so evil is maximum entropy. And then in the sacred response, when we discover your true self, there is a deep understanding that good and evil are polar opposites that express themselves in the relative world, that you need these contrasts to keep the game, the play of life going. So this is a good way to think about good and evil as constructs from the point of view of the localized body-mind as an identity or as an experience. So then, of course, comes up the fact then where is social justice? Where is justice in all this? Well, from the point of view of the localized body-mind, ultimately, karma never loses an address. It catches up. So ultimately, there are no debts that are left unpaid in the relative universe of space-time and causality. All debts are equal. In the end, the balance sheet is zero. Debts and credits are equal. This is the concept of social justice from the relative point of view. From the absolute, Lisa Hive says, I ride the karmic bus. So do we all, as long as we are persons. But now it's time to go beyond that, to see that the person itself is a process in your being. And this is the real meaning of the phrase from Krishna in one of the Upanishads, the most famous one of them, the Gita, where he says, Prakratim swam vashtubhai vishrajami puna puna. Curving back within myself, I create again and again. I create the mind, I create the experience that we call the body, I create the experience that we call the world. But prior to that, all these things play out. Justice, karma, good and evil, and their different stages. So how should we think of good and evil, even as persons? Well, we should think of it as people doing the best they can from their conditioned mind, from their level of awareness, and from their level of emotional and spiritual development. So even as karma always catches up and never loses an address, and even as all debts are paid and the bank balance sheet of karma is always zero, from our side, I think it is better to understand and ultimately to forgive, and also to bring a person to a new level of awareness by first getting to their level of awareness and then allowing them to evolve, because you have compassion, empathy for them. You have empathy because you know how they feel, whatever they feel, and you have compassion because you want to alleviate suffering, and only by alleviating suffering can you experience true love. In the absence of empathy, there is no compassion. In the absence of compassion, there is no love. And in the absence of love, there is no healing. So you forgive. You forgive not because the other person deserves forgiveness. You forgive because you deserve peace. Israel Santana Kelly says, You Are the Universe is a must-read. Thank you. I think so too. Okay, so you forgive not because the other person deserves forgiveness. You forgive because you deserve peace and you deserve to be healed. Having said all that, I think I'll go back to our very simple advice that comes through the ages. First love, and then do what comes naturally to you. First love, and then do what comes naturally to you. And then leave these abstractions behind, because at the level of space-time and causality, energy balances itself. Barbara Hollick says, all of Deepak's books are beautiful. Thank you, Barbara. So I too am sharing what I have learned, and I'm grateful that I have you there to share. Okay, so this is my answer to you. Mehrdad Jan Baksh. I like your name a lot. It has an element of onomatopoeia where the sound echoes the sense. Okay. All my love to you, and we'll be here tomorrow. Tomorrow I have to take a very early flight, 6 a.m. from Chicago to Boston, so probably it'll be later during the day. In the meanwhile, enjoy every day a joyful, energetic body, a loving, compassionate heart, a reflective, alert mind, and lightness of being. At least start with that intention. And if you start with that intention, then that intention will organize its own fulfillment. Okay, yes, you forgive because you deserve peace and you deserve healing. See you tomorrow.